he was trying to emulate the old smoke sauna effect. He sort of supercharged the heater prior to our session, and then would let the fire go out, and then we would enjoy the residual heat in the rocks. And so it had a beautiful, sweet, soft load, but also could crank if you wanted it to.
That's the unicorn of sauna stoves. You could get an Ito Kiwash shirt, but a Hotpert, arrived at the pinnacle of sauna enthusiast stoves.
But the way it was designed was that even the rock surface has certain areas if you want a real sharp load versus if you want that soft, elegant load of a sabu sauna quality.
Guess who's coming to sauna? Hekilunta. Guess who's coming to sauna? Hekilunta.
Hi all, it's Aero. As always, we've been doing this for a little over a year now, and it is, as recording this episode, it's very miserable. It would be a perfect sauna day in New York City as we speak. I unfortunately have to go to a classical concert, not sauna today. Sam, what's up with you?
Likewise, I mean, for the South, it's kind of a crummy day too. It's a little rainy, in the 50s. So here, it is also a good sauna day. But Risto, I saw Minnesota got a little weather too.
Yeah, we got a little bit of snow, so it's white outside. It's beautiful. And my brother-in-law invited me to go over and sauna today, so I think I'm going to go do that. He has a tiny electric sauna in his basement, so I don't know how many other guys he's inviting over. We'll just all cram in there like sardines. So I'm delighted to be joined today by Markus Raty, up in Canada. And as you can see, all of our video viewers, you can see Markus is a big fan of sauna. So we'll be getting into his story today and just getting to know him and hear what's going on with him. Welcome to the show, Markus.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. Thanks for having me. Pleasure to be on board.
Love the authenticity. I mean, we can tell. I mean, sauna hat in the sauna. I think this is a first for one of our guests. So you know what? The bar has now been set for all the future guests. So appreciate that, Markus. This is awesome.
All right on. So I've already enjoyed a beautiful sauna this morning here. Likewise, we got a blast of winter last night here, late March as we record, and 8 inches of snow, and it's about 15, 20 Fahrenheit right now. Already had a couple great snow rolls this morning after a great Lulu. But the sauna hat, quick backstory on that. This is my late brother's hat. I lost my younger brother a few years ago, and with him, I lost not just a brother, but a sauna brother. He was a real sauna hound, and he preferred the hat. He liked to insulate his brain from the high temps when we had our sessions, and I prefer myself. I've always preferred, to go without the hat and just to really feel the pain. And so anyway, I wanted to wear that hat to open up the episode just from the standpoint of recognizing him and one of the sauna brothers we've all lost.
Wonderful.
So this is your home sauna, right?
Yeah, this is in my backyard here in Toronto. I built this. I had a little bit of help, but built it 2019 actually, just before the world shut down here, coincidentally. And so I've had this almost 5 years now.
And the thermometer says, is it hot or is it getting colder as we speak?
Well, I had to air it out before we started here so that my phone doesn't overheat, or my camera doesn't overheat here. And so yeah, we had it about 200 Fahrenheit earlier, and so anyway, yeah, it's off now. The sauna's off. She reads about 65 Celsius, whatever that is in Fahrenheit, and so yeah, she's electrically powered. Main reason being that we have neighbors here, and I imagine that the campfire sauna smell that emanates over one's backyard is nice once in a while, but probably not every night. So just due to sort of consideration for the neighborhood, we went electric, and but it's a beautiful 11 kilowatt heater with a ton of rocks, and so it does emulate a wood burning lulu. It really provides a great heat.
Excellent. Yeah, more rocks the better, I always say.
Indeed.
So which heater is it?
This is it's a Haravia Virta.
Okay.
And so yeah, I think it's 10 and a half or 11 kilowatts. it's overpowered for the sauna in terms of the standard cubic footage formula. And but I've always erred on the side of making sure I have enough heat and not to leave myself wanting.
Yeah, and I suppose you're probably battling a little bit more than just heating up a room when it's, 10 degrees Fahrenheit outside.
Yeah, that's a great point. It's well insulated, certainly, but the heating time is directly reflective of what the ambient temperature is when we start. So today was a 90-minute heat up actually to get it to full temp. So yeah, that's certainly a case. And then also, we can touch on this later, but from a design standpoint, I probably violated some of the standard design rules. I have my sauna is under a slanted roof at the wrong end of the sauna as far as the formula would suggest, and I have windows that open above the heater. So certainly I lose some lulu, when I crank it, but I get plenty. And but having said that, with the extra sort of design quirks that I have, the extra power comes in handy.
Makes sense.
Is there anything you would want to, if you build that sauna again, is it perfect how you feel it right now? Or
and as you know, a sauna is never perfect. Perfect. That's an aspirational target, right? One that we hopefully really never reach, because then what do we do? If our sauna is perfect, all we have to do is sit in there and sweats. And I, of course, love tinkering. So, but from a design standpoint, certainly would have wanted the benches a little bit higher. I have great circulation, so it does. The stratification that one gets in electric saunas especially is minimized, but I would have had the benches a little bit higher and a little bit wider probably. I designed this and built it before I really knew a lot of the the technical stuff that I've learned over the last number of years, especially getting to the business. And so a few little tweaks, but certainly it's I'm very, very happy with it.
before I let Risto and Sam also ask some questions, and I'm not dominating this discussion, it's you are sort of like a rare breed, in our podcast, because it's like how when Risto introduced you, he called you Markus Raty, and I would have introduced you as Markus Raty. And obviously, which is the Finnish name. So you are a Finnish Canadian person. So we would love to hear something about, tell us about your background in you probably have doing sauna all your life, right? And where you were born in Canada, right?
Born in Toronto here, 1975, and to parents from Finland. They emigrated in the 60s and located to Thunder Bay, and moved to Toronto about 10 years later. I came along shortly thereafter. I was so born into a true Finnish home in Canada, and to a very, let's say, nationalistic father in terms of the Finnish pride that he continued to live with throughout his life. And of course, I then inherited that. Raised speaking Finnish. English is my second language officially. Certainly I can get by in Finnish these days and probably speak without an accent, but my vocabulary is quite weak these days. I haven't learned much new Finnish recently. And grew up here with, my father was a mechanical engineer and a professional welder, and just a real Renaissance man in general in many respects. And my mother was a more, let's say, level-headed and the glue that kept the family together. I have a little sister and little brother, the three of us growing up together. I was the oldest, and so it was a beautiful upbringing, just very middle class. In fact, the home that we're in right now, that I live in right now, we bought from my mom about 6 years ago. So this is my childhood home that I live in, and grew up as a bit of an odd duck. I had a Finnish parents. Father was very typical Finn, and we didn't have a TV. Led a very sort of sheltered upbringing insofar as my only awareness of the outside world was what I saw at school. So there was no real pop culture that came into our lives, and very disciplined, sort of not militarist, not a military style, but close to it. Father was a military man for a period. And so growing up, I always felt like it was a bit of an odd duck. I spoke English with an accent, even though I was born in Canada, and they knew that. My friends knew that. I had some strange clothes, let's say, whatever my parents picked, and had a bowl cut, with the funny haircuts. And so always felt like a bit of an odd duck. And but that sort of, you grow out of that. And ultimately, I'm very thankful for the upbringing, because my parents knew that I would learn the ways of the world, eventually. And while they had me under their roof, they really wanted to impart, not just their personal ethos and code, sort of code of character, but ultimately, cultural as well, where we come from, but also appreciation for where we are. So it was a beautiful upbringing in that respect. And then, yeah, you know what, when they let the reins loose a little bit, I went a little bit crazy for a while. I turned into a bit of a, as my nickname in high school was, the crazy Finn. And so, I probably lived my Finnishness, which was kind of became my calling card. I don't know why. I was a shy kid originally, but then must have blossomed at some point into this guy who was sort of the leader of the black sheep, so to speak. And in doing that, I wore my Finnishness on my sleeve always, on my heart and my sleeve, and so this crazy Finn identity was born, and I've lived that throughout my life now, and certainly I think my daughters are even now starting to adopt a little bit of that. So my upbringing was quite regular insofar as, I was had friends and played sports, but sauna was part of my identity right from the beginning. I had my first sauna at 3 months of age. Dad built a cottage on Georgian Bay, which is in Lake Huron, about 2.5 hours north of here, and built an island cottage there, and that's where I had my first sauna, and first of what became, I would imagine, almost 5,000 saunas by now, every week thereafter.
Tell us a little bit about that sauna at the cottage. Was that a wood-fired little hot box, or was it a grand cabin?
The first sauna that he built, which was a separate building right on the sandy shores of a small island called Elizabeth Island, wood-fired, and that's back. My father was at the time. Would be in the mid-70s, experimenting with different heater designs. He designed and fabricated wood-burning heaters, sold them for a while as well. In fact, the Hotpert, as they were known. His first name was Berti or Purdy, so it was a bit of a hot expert / hot Purdy handle. And so it was one of those. It was a tower style heater with the open mesh cylindrical tower, probably a half a ton of rocks in there. Really giant heater. He didn't, he was an engineer, but he was at the time 30 years old, so still honing his craft. And eventually, that sauna, that heater. He was trying to emulate the old smoke sauna effect of having he sort of supercharged the heater for, prior to the load, prior to our session, and then would let the fire go out, and then we would enjoy the heat from the heat, the residual heat in the rocks. And so it had a beautiful, sweet, soft load, but also could crank if you wanted it to. I was 12, 1987. We sold that property, or my parents did, and they picked up this beautiful piece of land, 400 acres on a small lake, maybe 10 kilometers inland. And that's where he built the sauna that became the sauna that I really came of age in. And the sauna that I still hold, we still go there, of course. And it's been 20 years since Dad passed. And we're now on Hotpert version 2.0. I had it refabricated recently, a couple of years ago. Luckily, he had drawings, and I hauled the 500-pound carcass of this heater into our little tin boat and into the car solo, dragged it to a metal fabricator here, the Finnish-owned company. They make sauna heaters as well, and with the carcass and the designs, they were able to refabricate it, right to the nth degree. And so that's the sauna that I really, like to speak about when I talk about the sauna that really was formative and shaped a big part of my life.
That's the unicorn of sauna stoves. You could get an Ito Kiwash, sure, but a Hotpert, you arrived at the pinnacle of sauna enthusiast stoves.
Listen, I'm absolutely biased, but I've also have 35 years of testing and evidence that would suggest that the thing puts out heat like no other heater I've experienced. And I spent a chunk of my time traveling the world looking for saunas, before it was cool. In the 90s, and went to, I'd say, over 100 public saunas in over 10 countries, and always came back home and thought that, this is really it. This is the one. And it's a 400 or 500 pound heater with another 500 pounds of rock in a 8x6 sauna, right? So it's not a huge sauna. The sauna is ensconced within the cottage cabin. So it's part of the same structure, and then it also heats the cottage after you finish your sauna. It has a trap door in the ceiling where it lets the heat into the cottage, which is a non-winterized cottage. And this sauna, it's got 4 different levels of seating, beautifully designed in a way that can accommodate more people than that footprint would suggest. And we can geek out over the technical stuff as long as we want here. But just in short, he had this really unique design where he had basically designed a helix or a helicoidal sort of spiral in the middle of the heater that both made the heat transfer more efficient, but also allowed for more contact with a greater number of rocks to the heating element. So you got that conductive heat that really supercharged the rocks. But the way it was designed was that even the rock surface has certain areas if you want a real sharp löyly versus if you want that soft, elegant löyly of a sauna quality. And so, the heater is monster. It takes in 2 foot long logs. Listen, it's also very efficient for its time. It burns very clean in terms of the off gassing out of it, but it's certainly she's a hungry girl, and we go through multiple face cords a year of firewood. Luckily, we have a vast forest to harvest from, and the other thing that I'll say about that sauna is, as a family, my father was a real eccentric dude. He loved extreme heat. He loved pushing the threshold of the sauna experience. In fact, when he died, he had an unfinished design for what he was going to submit to the Guinness Book of Records as the world's hottest sauna. So he wanted to be able to maintain a 200 Celsius ambient temperature. That's a 392 Fahrenheit, with the ability to throw löyly. Now, so again, this was a design challenge for him, and because he was a bit of a nut in many respects, an eccentric genius, absolutely. And so that's the kind of environment I grew up in. So our sauna, and which is not to say that we always sounded like that, right? Ultimately, part of it, he was very ahead of his time. He knew that any PR is good PR, right? So he really wanted to put sauna on the map, and he had many creative ways of doing that. One was to try and achieve this sauna of untold heat. I have this itch to resume that project one day. I'm not an engineer, but I have some friends, and one day we want to revive that project. But the sauna that he left behind, the heater, the Hotpert, doesn't get to those temperatures, but it's remarkable in that it provides a beautiful high ambient temperature without feeling like you're burning. It's created this excellent, enjoyable heat, but you wouldn't believe what the thermometer says. And so I've brought in a half dozen different measuring devices, including my favorite, which is the ThermoWorks meat smoker thermometer. So it's meant to measure the air temperature in a barbecue, not the meat temperature itself. So it goes to 500 Fahrenheit with a 4-foot cable, so it can now withstand the heat in the sauna without shorting out the interface, which is lower down. And I know that there's folks out there that's like, you're trying to be a tough guy, and sauna's not meant to be that hot. But this is what I would love to get into later is the vast diversity of sauna experience and how it can inform different people and inform their experiences and inform us in life, really. I mean, I'm so thankful for this opportunity to chat about, sauna, how it helps us build resilience that can translate over into other areas of our lives. And I'll bookmark that. But ultimately that thermometer that I brought in, that ThermoWorks one, I've had it at 157 Celsius, which I'm not sure if that's in Fahrenheit, at 320, I think. And I'm sitting there, and I had I had to bring my phone in, and I got about 90 seconds in before it overheated. I was just giggling with how hot it was, but also with how comfortable it was in terms of at least tolerable. Let's put it that way. But that's an extreme. That's that heater. The heater also operates very happily at 200 Fahrenheit, 220 Fahrenheit, which is kind of that with that mass of thermal mass, the extra heat does not radiate in a way that makes it uncomfortable. That thermal mass really holds the heat and then gives you this gentle heat. So we, for example, with my kids, we're in there at 200, 210, and they're 7 and 9. They've been doing it their entire lives. They're absolutely comfortable. It's not child abuse, I assure you. So it's a heater that is incredibly diverse and robust, and I'm just so thrilled that my father left that gift behind.
Well, I don't trust your electronic measuring devices. I'd have to feel it to know
Yeah,
for
man.
sure.
You know that you three of you have a standing invite to Perry
We
Sound.
will. We will show
Yeah.
up. Trust us. We will show up. Hey, let's go back. This is very exciting stuff that you're talking about. We've touched this topic on our podcast before, but you mentioned that your father's the heater, the stove, that it masters both that sharp low steam and then the soft steam as well. Now, many of our listeners are they enjoy their saunas with these wall-mounted electric heaters. So there's absolutely no way that they could be able to experience that soft low. So the soft steam, because it doesn't exist with that amount of rocks. So is there any way to explain kind of a little deeper that, because we were actually talking about this also when we were talking about banyas. Our friend Brian was on our show, and he was explaining how there's a certain way you have to throw water into the banya heat, huge ass heater to get that feeling. But so let's talk a little about that soft load.
I'd be happy to. So first of all, I am not an engineer or a technical person, but I am let's call it a self-educated layman. And with the Hotpert specifically, the surface area of the rock mass was large. Imagine an oil drum and the surface area of that, and then maybe add 30%. So quite a large circular surface area. So the design was done in a way that's part of the surface area of the rocks were touching directly the heating element. So we had that direct heat transfer from the heat source, not the fire directly, but from the metal it's heating. And quick side note, he built. This is lovely. I'll never get over this, but he had experience with heaters deteriorating over time, the welding seams coming apart from extreme heat. So he sourced the steel for his heater from the local crematorium maker because he wanted to have robust enough materials that you could incinerate human flesh. Again, tongue in cheek, right? That was my dad. So it was a very thick steel, transferred a lot of heat directly into the rocks. But then on the back side of the rock surface, the design was such that it was on a slant. So the rocks that were over here were not directly touching the heating elements. So the heat that the surface rocks got were transferred through many layers of rocks. So the rock temperature stayed a lot lower. I'd say it was maybe 300 Fahrenheit versus 500-600 Fahrenheit for the rocks that were directly touching the heating source. So the Lola then has a much different character when it comes off those two differently heated rocks. The hottest rocks, the instant evaporation, you get that invisible Lola steam that we talk about. Very clean, very sharp. It washes over you very quickly, and but still not. Of course, when you get to a such saturation point, if you do multiple ladles, you can cook yourself, you can boil yourself out of there. But with a regular dosage, it stings, but still has this depth to it. And then the rocks in the back that were, say, 300 Fahrenheit, plus or minus, much slower evaporation of the water, a much slower onset of that wave that washes over you, that blanket of Lola that just coats you and just dances over your body, and then lingers longer. And you get that sort of steamy, moist sauna experience. That, again, once in a while, I love that. I absolutely love the vast breadth of Lola specifically. So that would be my layman's answer. So if someone was looking to replicate that at home, I would suggest one trick might be just to get extra rocks more than they recommend for the manufacturer recommendation, and then just remove the Lola from the direct element, and then you get a softer steam. And this is I can firsthand relate. I was at one of my clients' saunas downtown last night in Toronto. Here, it's a 30-person sauna called Alter, and they have a beautiful setup there. And they invited me because they have a class called Sisu, which of course in Finnish means indomitable fighting spirit, or resilience, right? It's the core of the Finnish identity and character, along with, of course, sauna. And they have a Sisu class, which is a build your resilience class. This is downtown Toronto. This is a beautiful thing. And it's a 70-minute class where they take you through, Lola and then 2-degree or 36-degree water with extended time periods. My point is that that 60 kilowatt heater provides a beautiful soft load because of the amount of rocks that are, we've designed it so that the rocks come off the elements. There's no direct contact. So especially for a non-experienced sauna clientele, such as theirs, the soft lulu is preferred to a sharp lulu.
Yeah, and you can, I don't know if you ever do this, but you could, we've talked about this on the podcast. You could splash your walls ahead of time, raise your base humidity, and then that way, if you don't have a ton of rocks, the humidity, the steam that you're giving, the lulu that you're creating, you get more of an effect from that.
Yeah, absolutely concur.
Yeah, and Risto, correct me if I'm wrong, but I mean, I know a lot of Youpers that'll take like an old tin can and place it in their, in their sauna stove and pour their water in there, so they've got kind of a little bubbler going.
Yep. I told that to our former neighbor who built a sauna after we moved away. He built a nice mobile sauna. So shout out to you, Calvin. But he took a beer can and then poked holes in it and put it down in the rocks, and then that's what he does, and it's pretty nice.
Yeah, I mean,
whatever
works.
Yeah, there are many verses about that everywhere. But as I think I speak for all of us, is like our general understanding is that it's steam. Steam is sort of like almost the missing part in the North American sauna. So we can talk about flavors of steam, ad nauseum, but at the same time, most people are not used to it. They're not comfortable with the steam part, and I think that's pretty much maybe. But there are other issues, so we don't have to go through them now. But that's probably the number one obstacle that we have with sauna in North America.
I have a comment on that, if I could. I concur with you, by the way. Absolutely. I've introduced probably close to 1,000 people to sauna over my course of my life. I've been, been 40 years of, or let's say 35 years of sauna hosting directly since I was 12 or 13 and started bringing friends to the cottage. So there's two schools of thought on that. And one is the sort of, listen to your body and we're trying to onboard these new sauna denizens with listen to your body and really, you got to go. And I appreciate that. My ethos is more, don't listen to your body. Let's push yourself a little bit. And similarly with the steam, I feel like, if we make sauna, or not make, but introduce sauna as something that's fun, and fun can take many forms. It's okay to have sauna competitions, in my estimation. My girls are 7 and 9, and we're here in the bench here, and they have friends over, they're Belgian friends from down the street, and they're having sauna contests with their friends. And they're standing on the bench here next to where I am right now. They're throwing lulu. My daughter's name is Emmy, the youngest daughter, and she's the real sauna hound. And her friends are like, "Oh, Emmy, I can't believe it!" So they're standing up on the top bench, taking the lulu, and then just at the moment they can't take anymore, they race out of the sauna and jump in the ice cold plunge. 4 of them together. These 4 girls between 7 and 10, and they're shrieking in the water. They're pushing themselves at a young age, right? And so you overcome these perceived barriers like lulu. If we introduce sauna in a way, of course we can't do this at all times in public environments, for example. But my point is that my sauna teaching ethos, if I'm doing it, if I'm bringing somebody personally onto into the sauna game, sauna world, I say, hey, just come along for the ride, and do as I do, but at your own level. And we get right after it. We don't take it easy. And there's a fair bit of coaching in there, but if you strip away any rules, have you fellas must have seen that song from what they call the Hauliwood vampires. They sang that sauna song for the Finlandia Foundation Sauna Week. Yeah. And I love that song and that line that says, I think it was, do it your way, and that's the beauty of sauna, is that we can be prescriptive about it. And I've been guilty of that for a period in my life. There's 3 eras of my sauna existence, which of interest we can chat about later. But there was a period where I was getting too prescriptive, and I'd fallen into these sort of sauna mores that we talk about in terms of whether it's functional design or here's how you sauna, and it was very methodical, right? And And that was a period, my dad had passed away, so I lost my North Star. And my sauna buddies, I grew up in the Finnish Pentecostal church environment. And and so when you're growing up Pentecostal, if you stray from the flock, then and we didn't drink alcohol or do narcotics or anything. We were just Finnish church kids. So our adrenaline requirements were fueled by sauna and all the hijinks that go along with that. So I grew up with this beautiful crew of Finnish Canadian guys and American. Actually, there's a strong congregation in West Palm Beach and Lake Worth. So we'd be bouncing around different Finnish communities around North America where they had a strong congregation. And so we had this amazing, just no inhibitions, and sauna came with us everywhere. We drag saunas, on every adventure, whether they were portable, little tarps over a metal frame and a bag of rocks and a small portable stove that we drag in a pickup truck. We pop them up anywhere. So then when I lost touch with those guys and my father had passed, I lost my way a little bit for a while. And I got prescriptive about sauna. And it's only been recently, the last handful of years, where I'm like, hey, I've never been a conformist. I've always been sort of an anti-establishmentarian, thanks to my father. And large thanks to my father. And I've carved my own path since then, of course. But I caught myself recently thinking that, or reflecting on this. This is back to your point, Aaron. Sorry to belabor the point, but about the Laulu and how North Americans don't understand that. And there's no other way except, it's the number of ambassadors that we create, whether they're official or otherwise. Sauna ambassadors, folks like us who all have our own ways of bringing people into the sauna world. And it's that hand holding, but then once the fawn has found her footing, we have to let go of that hand and say, okay, let's get, you guys got to find your own protocol. My encouragement to people is to sauna and then push yourself a little bit, enjoy some steam, or maybe not enjoy, but take some steam, as the Canadians would say it, have some laulu, and don't run at first blush of discomfort. Everything worth pursuing has some discomfort attached to it. Seeking suffering is not a bad thing, in my opinion. Now, there are great gradients of it. I always suggest, hey, push a little bit. Okay, take a break, come back, but then don't just one-off it. Do it again. It takes a number of times to develop a sauna routine. A little bit more water each time. Go with a crew, maybe some experienced people. Eventually, if you stick with it, your own sauna practice will reveal itself to you, and that's the way of the sauna. That's what I can say is the optimal path, which is there is no path except your own path. But and that will also then, I think, bring people into the Laulu world. It's one new sauna enthusiast at a time.
Well, yeah. And we've been telling people, you talked about it as like fun, and I like that way of articulating it, but also like robust might be like the way that I think about it, and as if there's a dartboard and there's a bullseye in the middle, and we're not sure where that is, and none of us have quite ever been in that bullseye of sauna, probably, although we felt like we've been close to the bullseye, and we're all different points on the dartboard, and just to encourage each other to, if you want to, you can move towards that center, and there's a lot of fun and robustness in the center of that. And in sauna at its core is a hack, and it's kind of an extreme experience. And so I don't want to see us take that away too much to make it overly technical and prescriptive and not allow for flexibility and all kinds of weird stuff, or to have it be too like safe and spa-like. So sauna at its core is, like I said, a hack and extreme.
Right. Yeah.
So now teach me something here. All of the three of you. I've been in New York, in the US, for 26 years, and I'm in the learning process of something. I really haven't understood yet what a dry sauna is. So is a dry sauna, is that a compromise, or is that just a regular sauna without steam, or what is a dry sauna? Do you guys know?
I've got, I mean, I've got an idea that the dry sauna is just the brainchild of some, lawyer somewhere trying to save some client's butt. Because honestly, you can't have sauna without some sort of steam, moisture, that a sauna at 0% humidity, that just sounds awful. I can't. I mean, granted, we talk about that rule of 200 of, if it's 180 degrees Fahrenheit, you're probably sitting at 20% humidity in the room. Give or take, there's going to be fluctuations depending on how much you're throwing and what your ventilation looks like, and there's always those variables, but that's going to be real close. But like we talked about, Marcus said, you can sit in 300 degrees Fahrenheit, but the second you add some steam in there, ooh, 10% humidity in a 300-degree room, that'll cook you right out. So yeah, that's where that low percentage, is going to be tolerable. But I think as our listeners are hearing me ramble here about humidity, I really think you need a little bit of moisture. You got to have that. And even if it's just one, hey, maybe you don't like a lot of steam in your sauna. Maybe you throw a little bit, maybe you don't. Even if you don't throw anything on your on your rocks, you're still going to be sitting at somewhere of a relative humidity, based on your region or based on your house. So 0% does sound just dry and itchy.
My thought, just very briefly, is the term dry sauna. I feel like it's like a misnomer just for the word sauna. So when we speak about in North American parlance, a dry sauna and wet sauna, in my experience, at least here in Canada, references like a steam room, effectively. They've borrowed this term, they've culturally appropriated sauna, and applied it to many different forms of heat therapy. So when they say dry sauna, they just mean sauna, but they don't have the knowledge to understand that sauna is only sauna. There is no dry or wet. Sauna is a relatively dry, environment, and then we control moisture according to our wishes, and that makes it a wet sauna. I don't think so. It's just sauna. But so I think just from a referencing standpoint, when they say dry sauna, they mean traditional Finnish sauna. When they say wet sauna, they reference like a tiled room with steam.
I would say it's both. I think the historical root that I've noticed is, so they didn't used to call saunas. It was like the Finnish steam bath. They translated, it was translated out, or the vapor bath. But the confusion is people were already familiar with steam baths of different types, like Marcus said, but it was the high humidity, like more like a Turkish hammam, or, just like a steam room. And so then early on, it was kind of distinguished, well, it's dry. It's not like it's so moist like that. And so that was one of I think the early reason they were using that, to let this is steamy, but actually the environment, the air is actually pretty dry. But then it's come to mean, especially here in the United States, I think almost all the time it's meant by the business owner to mean you're not supposed to put water on our rocks because our our heater wasn't made to take any water.
Okay.
Which
Well,
is
it's
BS.
electric. You can't put water on that.
That's right. Yeah.
But it's also it's carried further, because the dry sauna thought all that goes with it. So that not that it would have exact to do this with the same thing, but it's about maybe you compromise on ventilation. You definitely don't have a drain because it's a dry sauna. You don't need any of the dry sauna, so it goes like a little different direction. And also something that I actually learned from Risto here. I never thought about it, but there's a cultural difference, because obviously I spent my 39 first years in Finland, in Helsinki to be specific. So I always, back in the days, I was speaking about sauna bathing, because I thought that when you do sauna is you sauna bathe, but you don't actually look at it that way, at least here in the US side of things. It's like bathing is washing, it's cleansing. Here the sauna is a verb, and it's sort of like is back home too, but you do sauna bathe, even though there's no soap bars involved.
I was just looking at yesterday, because we're doing an episode about books for our family sauna podcast, but I was just looking at this excellent book from Kai Bremer called The World of Sauna. And there's a quote, and I don't know if you guys know the original Finnish quote, but it says there's a Finnish saying translated into English here. It says, "Since the point's to get clean, why skimp on the steam?"
I love that.
Yeah, beautiful. Never heard that before.
Yeah, that's nice. That's nice. So what's happening in Toronto right now? What's going on in the sauna world, I mean?
Yeah, there's probably an underrated mini sauna boom happening here, at least commercially speaking. There are a number of these larger scale public sauna spas that are opening up in the urban core. These would be 4,000 square foot facilities that have a 30-40 person sauna, and then the requisite cold plunges and tea lounge. They don't have the sort of restaurant and food and drink offering attachments like the Russian banya style, of which we have many here in Toronto as well. Then in the periphery of Toronto, there are several sauna spas that have opened up. One's called Thermea and one's called Vetta, which is a Finnish Canadian guy opened up a traditional Finnish sauna spa. 5, 6, 7 saunas, different pools. It's an outdoor giant compound. There's the Scandinav spa in close by. So there's a real renaissance going, if you can call it a renaissance. I don't know exactly how vibrant the sauna scene was here in the earlier part of the last century, but certainly there were steam baths here, like there were, steam baths, to your point, Risto, like there were in New York as well. So there's definitely a sauna boom going. There are pop-up sauna events happening where people bring, the organizers bring these moors, sauna tents, and they bring portable cold plunges, and a DJ sets up, and they have 500 people dance the day away in between saunas and cold plunges. So it's all happening, quite rapidly, and these places are all full all the time. And then from a more residential standpoint, certainly there's a lot of interest in backyard garden saunas here in Toronto right now. So very active scene, still very sort of embryonic in its growth life cycle. But there's a bit of excitement happening right now in the sauna world here in Toronto for sure.
Well, and in the sauna enthusiast community, there's not much talk of Toronto,
No.
But I drove through with my brother a few years back, and we stopped at one of the public banyas, and I loved it. And how many public banyas are there in Toronto?
I'd say there's at least 6. And when you say Toronto, like the greater Toronto area, which is it's a 7 million person city. So there's 6 that I know of within a 20-minute drive from where I'm sitting, or maybe 30 minutes from where I'm sitting right now. 6 to 8, let's say. Then there's also there are Korean sauna spas, and there's a Chinese sauna spa, and I use sauna in quotes in these instances. They have different forms of heat therapy, but some of them resemble saunas. And but yeah, the Russian community is very strong and active here in Toronto. There are the one you speak of, probably the Southwestern Bathhouse, Banya, which is the one that I used to go to at least once a month until I got my own backyard set up, and I still go there at least a couple times a year. And so very vibrant Russian banya scene here, and very egalitarian throughout. It's amazing how little ego or antagonism or conflict you find in any of these environments. These Russian banyas are now starting to be frequented by, let's say, millennials. Young people who have caught the sauna's cool bug, and they're mixing with these hardcore, Eastern European men who are grizzled and rough around the edges, and it's a beautiful thing to behold. These folks that are from probably different walks of life, and they're there, schwitzing together or saunaing together with a very beautiful, sort of how it is, guys. It's we're all the same on the sauna bench, as we should be outside of the sauna bench too. But sauna is what the great equalizer.
Yeah, and that's what I love to see. You can't get to the middle of that dartboard, that robust experience, without connecting to an older generation who's connected to an older generation who's connected to an older generation. And I think that's what we're missing a lot in the current boom. Is I rarely see anyone over, or even over 40 or 50 in the scene, and especially someone who grew up with it, who has a Russian or Finnish last name.
You know what? Great point. Very different sauna culture or sauna environment between the Russian style banyas and then these new modern facilities that are effectively meant to be like social bathhouses, but so they're like bar alternatives. So if you don't want to go to the bar and meet somebody, you go to the sauna, and they're becoming these like, public meeting where, singles go to mingle. And so you definitely don't have that depth of experience and that sort of passing of the baton, if you will, from generation to generation. That's a great point, Listo.
This question always comes up when it's banya and sauna. Is, in your mind, what's the difference?
Oh, in my mind, I don't care, because, and this is the easy answer, which is that there is this beautiful community of heat seekers. And whether you call it sauna or batsu or banya, vasta, vihta, or venik, it doesn't matter to me. We are sharing a sacred space of heating our bodies up and breaking bread, breaking sweat together. As we might be metaphorically right now, I sort of imagine that we're all sitting on the sauna bench on the shores of a small lake in cottage country of Ontario, and just talking openly here. So that's the kind of environment that the heat, the place creates. Technically, I don't want to dip my toes in those waters. I'm not, familiar enough with, the operations of a banya. I've been in banyas that are 80 Celsius and that are 130 Celsius. So there are very different styles of banya as well. So, so that all being said, if the spirit of the facility is where it needs to be in terms of how we talk about sauna, then it doesn't matter what you call it or really how the heater works, and because I see similar expressions on people's faces. I see similar conversations happening, irrespective of what the physical nature of the heating source is. It's a beautiful, beautiful thing. Yeah. I don't discriminate, quite frankly. Now, I do discriminate if we get into the technical side, and we can geek out over that. But from an experiential standpoint, I feel like these are all very similar. These specifically, like banya and sauna, are very, very similar and offer a very similar path to a lifelong practice of enjoying, heating our bodies.
Markus, I really liked how you talked about resilience and exposing yourself to maybe something that's a little bit outside of your comfort zone. And I got to imagine a millennial sitting next to, either somebody who is maybe 60, 65 years old. Maybe they grew up in the Eastern Bloc and probably saw certain pieces of construction come, crumbling down. You can probably learn something, from those individuals. And what a curveball that millennial or Gen Z, whatever age you are, if you're younger and you've never really talked to, some people that are outside of your cultural sphere, you can learn a lot, and you are not going to be prepared for some of the things that they talk about. So building that mental resiliency to saying, whoa, I never thought of it that way, or, hey, I never even knew that event happened or existed because it happened in Lithuania in 1953. Or whatever that is.
What a great point. What a great point, that it's not just physical resilience, it's also that mental. And that is sorely lacking, I would submit, in society today, in large part, in at least in segments. And what a great point, because, that's another way of putting yourself out of your comfort zone. Enough said. What a wonderful point. I'm not sure how much time we have, but I did want to touch on some fun stuff about some really a couple cool, awesome sauna stories, if you guys are interested.
Yes, please.
Yeah, I just love, you have a lot of good, excellent guests. I've listened to every podcast, by the way, of course, and excellent guests, great technical knowledge. And I wanted to impart some more, just a little bit more sort of, maybe anecdotal or arm's length storytelling from a standpoint of how fun sauna can be. And I'll start with, I remember I was in Thunder Bay, which is, by the way, in terms of my sauna lineage, this is completely maybe, irrelevant to my personal story, but in Thunder Bay, there is probably the most legendary public sauna in Canada. It's called Kangas Sauna. You guys have probably heard about it. And even to this day, it's got 16 different saunas within the facility, public saunas. That was opened by my grandmother's sister. So, the sauna story in my family, both on my father, who was a sauna designer and builder, but on my mom's side, the women in her family were very resilient, early pioneering Finnish Canadian women. So Kangas Sauna was opened by my great aunt in the 60s. And my grandmother lived on the shores of Lake Superior. She had a beautiful lakeside sauna there. And, we would go there, this coming of age, go there throughout my life. But I was there one year, 2010, and my other buddies, some of my non-Finnish buddies had an ice fishing shack in the middle of Lac de Mille, just north of the Minnesota border. And we went out to this, what he called the Hardwater Hotel, beautiful ice fishing shack. And I asked if I could invite one of my Finnish buddies from Thunder Bay, Jaakko Natri, who's actually runs the Natri Bros Surf and Sup, which is he basically runs the North Shore surfing scene in Superior. So I'm sort of intertwining two stories here. First of all, I invited my buddy Jaakko. Alan said, "Yeah, you can come, no problem." Jaakko brings with him this giant sort of canvas setup, and it's got a military canvas tent in it, right? And then he pulls out this smokestack. Then he pulls out this small little stove. Then he pulls out a giant bag of rocks. Then he pulls out, a couple bags of, firewood, and then proceeds to erect a sauna in the middle of the lake, in the frozen tundra, but a mile offshore. And we get 10 grown men into this space. It's 100 Celsius. If it's 1 degree, it's 200 degrees, Fahrenheit. And pipe is going out the top. And so we're all there in our underwear, right? And it's sweating, and right next to the ice fishing shack. And then as we're saunaing, the floor of the sauna is slowly lowering because the heater is melting the ice in the lake. And, so we're there, I had never, obviously no big deal having a sauna on the lake, but for me, that was such a beautiful experience to be able to have this ice fishing experience enhanced with a sauna on the lake that we didn't know when we were going to fall through or not. So we only had limited time.
That's awesome. I mean, and I suppose, there's got to be nothing better than taking a little of, melted lake water, and using that to throw on you. Oh, totally. Absolutely.
Yeah. And we're standing up there and there's snow on the ground. So you have the snow wash whenever instead of the cold plunge. And so it was just, and these guys are not sauna guys, they're ice fishing guys. And there's just two of us Finns. So we were the ones that were, really bringing them along, and it turned into a really, really a sauna party, spontaneous sauna party in the middle of February. It's, 0 degrees. It was amazing. And that same guy, Jaakko, he runs the surfing scene. So they do all year surfing. So they come out of the water in February, and the waves are the biggest in the winter. And they come out of Superior, and they're on the beach. They've popped up a little tent sauna, and they peel off their suits to the waist, warm up. I mean, what's better than that? You come out of the frozen lake and you reheat to go back out and surf again. And all the non-Finns are like, "Man, how do you stay out all day?" It's like, "Hey, I got superpowers." One more I want to tell you guys. This is a really cool one. I was visiting my brother-in-law in Squamish. It's a mountain town about 45 minutes north of Vancouver, just on the edge of the Canadian Rockies. And my brother-in-law there, his brother-in-law, was talking about how he had heard through a friend, there's this sauna that somebody built on the middle of this glacial river that comes off of the snow melt, and it flows down into the ocean, the Pacific. And that 4 miles up the road, up the mountain service road, if you park at a certain, signpost, or not a post, but like a certain, like a whatever marking, and if you hike into the bush, after about half an hour, you'll come to a river. And if you go down that river a little bit, there's a sauna that someone's built on the edge of this wild river in the middle of the Canadian Rockies. That's just there, meant to be used by whoever can find it. And
excellent.
They had, and so I go there, and he gave me the wrong direction. So I went a mile too far up the road, spent 4 hours hiking through like thick, like almost like rainforest jungle, right? Because of that thick, British Columbian forest is impenetrable. And I'm just losing it, and I can't find it. I'm not going to give up. So I go back to my car and I figure out again, okay, let me try here. And there was, because he said there's kind of like a goat path you can see that meanders into the bush. So I think I found what I think is the goat path. I go down it. Not the case. I'm still too far upriver, it turns out. Anyway, then I hear some sort of shrieks, some female like screaming and laughing. And I was like, wow, what's weird. So I just follow the shoreline down, and I see this sauna, this beautiful sauna perched on the edge of this fast flowing glacial river with a small little pocket of still water, where you can jump in. And I'm just running. I couldn't believe it. It was like, Christmas morning. I honestly was one of the most adrenaline charged moments of my life. And I race down to the sauna and I race open. You can see smoke coming out of the stack. And I open the door and there's 4 nude women inside. It was heart attack, like in their like 20s, and I was like, whoa, immediately I'm like this, oh, ladies, sorry. And they started giggling. And they were just happened to be a handful of people that knew about it. And so I politely waited till they left. Then I went, someone was still hot. There was a sign that said there, hey, to the effect of, we built this for you. Since you found it, please leave it the way you did. If you use some wood, bring some wood, or go and scavenge for some wood in the forest and then replace it. So there's always fuel for the next guy or gal. And I had one of the most unbelievable sauna experiences of my life by myself there in that sauna heat, in that 0-degree water. And, with all the 5 hours of hiking that it took to find it, it was just such a beautiful moment. And just sort of another way of sauna bringing these adventures to life.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I have a new bucket list item.
Well,
I gotta go find that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and it's so much more than just the technical details. It's all those elements. It's the location, it's the getting there, it's the who you encounter. And so here's my question though, because this is the reason I bring up the technical. That's a barrel sauna, isn't it?
You got it. It was a barrel sauna.
Yep.
And in this case, though, it was built by a Finnish Canadian guy, in fact, named Markus, it turns out, and just built it. You need to drag all the stuff there. But the one bench was elevated way above the normal height. So it was like you had to climb, and there was a set of stairs that led to it. The step up to the top bench. So you were all the way, even if you dangled, now you might be hunched over a little bit, but if you were lying down, you're direct way above the heat source. And so you did get a great lulu out of that. And again, to your point, that's why I say technical be darned, because sure, there are laws of physics we want to observe. But other than that, if you got a bag of rocks and some canvas burlap or, some canvas material, you can find sticks to build a tent. You have a sauna, right? And so from an experiential standpoint, I'm a sauna purist in many respects, but I am absolutely an evangelist of many forms of sauna expression, because you never know what gets people hooked and what kind of an experience, not just the physical, but the experience. And like I used to, at the sauna at the cottage, I would onboard my buddies, into extreme heat right away, because they were up for it. They wanted it. I wouldn't do that to newbies or people I didn't know, but they wanted it. And so we get after, because once you reach that point of nirvana and you push through those thresholds, there are untold riches behind that physical barrier we put up against. And then that's when the mind is free to roam, when you release yourself from the shackles of our ADHD brains. And we are, the body's fighting the heat, so the mind's free to roam. My point in saying that is that those guys, even though it was painful, some did it, some didn't, they have a memory of that experience, which is attached to sauna, and they go and seek that out, and they are now hooked for life, and so there are many ways to bring people on board a sauna, finding it in the bush, or even a tent sauna on the ice, and the people that were with me in those instances were not sauna folks, but they sure as heck were when they left that experience.
So what most people yet don't know is that that Markus, Sam, and I are not Risto at this point, but we are building this sauna ambassador network. So how do you feel? And this is now for Markus and Sam. What should we do first to you're talking about nirvana, and we know that most people don't ever get to experience that nirvana. We're talking about the sauna experience. I was about to be bathing, but I cut that part off. So what Markus first, what should we do now?
So I think it's a two-pronged answer from my standpoint, and one is the good old-fashioned, boots on the ground guerrilla marketing, for lack of a better term, which is hand-to-hand combat, right? And that's getting out there and creating experiences, not just, by the way, I'm having a sauna, do you want to come? But creating sauna experiences that are public, accessible, like the sauna camp days they did was it in Minnesota a couple months ago, they had that sauna village area. That's a great example of how to build that, not just the experience, but to build some, put some marketing behind, it drives away eyeballs. But from a personal standpoint, if you're one's an ambassador, I think we have to develop a programming which involves not just our daily hand-to-hand combat, but let's figure out a programming initiative that we can put a little bit of money, but more sweat equity behind to create sauna experiences that are impossible to ignore, right? Whatever that looks like. And because those are gateways, sort of gateway experiences. And we all have our territories. Maybe we can create those experiences within our territories to whatever degree. That's part of it. So there's the everyday live and breathe the sauna, which I have for 48 years and continue to do so. And in fact, I'm more supercharged than ever, having met you guys, since I've met you guys, because I've always been in my own bubble before that. So there's that. And then the other piece is the virtual piece, which is, I believe that there is a need for a sort of a home base of some kind for sauna, like a repository of sauna information or cultural, it's going to be not necessarily technical. There's lots of info on how to build a sauna, how to buy a sauna, but how to live sauna and how to, meaningfully, the breadth and depth that sauna can offer. So some kind of a forum that's online that maybe, I don't know, and I'm just spitballing here, but that aggregates, the things like the great resources already out there, Sauna Digest being one of them, all of the resources that are available, but ultimately, it's a two-pronged approach. We have to figure something out virtually to create that sort of network effect of initial interest and awareness, and then translate some of that into real-world application, I think. And then when people get a taste, again, one-to-one will take a long time. So if we can do one-to-many, how can we design a one-to-many program that has 1 to 500, or let's say 1 to 50, and then create that, and then create these raving ambassadors out of those experiences, and then they're going to go forth, and then we multiply.
Markus, yeah, you hit it on the head there. I mean, you gotta, I love the hand-to-hand combat, kind of just guerrilla marketing. I love that. And really what I take out of that is, hey, go grab somebody and take them and show them why you love sauna. If you've got somebody that you enjoy hanging out with and you care about, share this with them. This could be something that is a positive for them, and then a positive for whoever they introduce it to. And you know what? It's not going to be for everybody. There's going to be people that fight tooth and nail, and maybe it's just not for them. But it's worth a try. Share what you love with your friends and family, and you're gonna expose people to things that they didn't know. So just like we talked about mental resilience, physical resilience, trying new things is a part of part of this great experience that we all get to share together. So make sure that you get out there and are doing it. So.
You know what? You prompted another one short addendum to my comment, Sam, which is, I'm fortunate enough to have a sauna in my backyard here in Toronto, and what we regularly do here is just we host sauna parties, and so we invite friends, neighbors, strangers alike, and the sauna is always on. In the backyard, the barbecue's close by, the cold plunger's there, kids might be playing games in the backyard, lawn darts, whatever, but the sauna is always on, and there is a constant flow of traffic in and out of it, so that you're not always maximally occupied. So you're not limited to the number of people that sauna fits. The sauna just is there. It's not like, oh, let's go and learn how to sauna. And so when it's integrated into the environment at large, it's less intimidating, because you can go at your own pace back and forth. But so there's 20 people that come to a backyard party, and all of them at some point get touched by the sauna. And so if we could find just an idea, within this ambassador group, within our networks, if we know people that have backyard or access to saunas that they can share with others, whether it be at the cottage or in the urban environments, and if we can maybe even think about a way to maybe get them to become like, unofficial ambassadors, maybe, or somehow engage them to actively host periodically sauna garden parties or backyard parties or whatever you want to call them, and whatever they look like. And so you don't need too many of those people to do a couple of those a year, and aggregately we've now touched a couple thousand people.
Yeah, because what makes our task so much more difficult is that it's not only teaching one soul at a time, is because there's an unlearning process too. So it's like most people have a stern understanding what sauna is, and it's not necessarily been close to what we're aiming at. And we have the history on our side, because the sauna that we are doing has been done for at least 2,000 years now.
And I agree with you. And I used to think exactly the same way you did in terms of the unwinding or the it's almost worse than somebody not knowing anything because they know the wrong stuff. But I found the best way to tackle that is not to actually try and unwind and explain to them what they misunderstood or what information they were delivered that was inaccurate. That's almost like, it's like, ignore your competition. Just do what you do so well that it's impossible to ignore. So rather than explain away why they're misinformed, I don't even acknowledge it. I'm just like, hey, let's get after it. Let me show you sauna, how, sauna through my lens. And it's such an instantaneous change in many instances where they're not like, oh, but I thought it was this. No, they're just so into the moment and enjoying it. If we live it with the passion that we all, care for it with, that they are almost subconsciously converted right into the right headspace for real sauna. And then they become, raving lunatics, just like the rest of us.
Yeah. Just presenting a picture of it's not this, that's not very compelling, and North American, commercial culture, it's always going to boil it down to like the most simple, like wear a plastic suit in your living room kind of thing.
A product.
And that's just going to happen. But if we focus on having it be as robust as possible, include as many elements as possible, and have people experience that is, they're not going to want to go back. That's going to always be in the back of their mind, even if they do get the plastic suit. I'm surprised by when we introduce people to sauna, all those non-sauna related things that really connect with people, the grapes afterwards, or the balsam fir essential oil that we used, so the smell, there's all these little things, the sausage, like Americans understand that sauna is healthy, but we need to add some of these other things to help balance that a little bit, like some sausage and beer. We need to balance that health with some sausage and beer,
which are also healthy. They're soul foods, and and they also enhance quality of life. I used to sell cigars for a living, and I had to convince people they were a health food. So I'm well versed in integrating things that might at first glance not be considered good for you, but it's part of the balance and the beauty of life. Is we need to be able to, just to your point, Listo, incorporate all of this stuff and make it. And fun is a word that I maybe hang on to my hat on too many times, but maybe I can touch on happiness down the road before we part company here. But I completely occur, because when you have the sauna just an element of an experience, when they remember that, they don't, the sauna, they might not remember the narrative of our lives is built from the stories that we remember. We might not remember them exactly as they transpired, but what we remember is that time in that guy's backyard, or by the lake, or by the cabin, or at that sauna club, and how enjoyable it was. And it's not even isolating the heat. It's the company, the conversation, the afterglow, the conviviality, and the general feel-good hormones that it generates, these negative ions that wash over us. That's what they remember. And they can't maybe pinpoint what it is, but they know what it is when they feel it. And I think that they just, without even referencing their old them, they shed their old sauna skin, their misinformed sauna skin, and they let the new skin grow, and they never look back.
As of recording this, we just came a few days ago out with a health episode. We had Dr. Mark Timmerman, and I'm a very lucky person in many different ways. And one thing is that it just, I don't think that it's necessarily a coincidence, but a lot of people that I speak to are familiar with the Upper Bench podcast. And I get comments constantly of the podcast, and obviously, we thank you, Markus, for being one of our fans. And at the health episode, it was praised because of Dr. Timmerman was telling that he's actually, after sauna, he's having a drink with his buddies, and so he was playing into our corner. Is that like that fulfilling experience? We are already severely over time, and there's topics that we haven't touched that we definitely decided that we would touch. One out of the realm of saunas to your cigars, but we're gonna save that to a next episode with you. But final questions. At this point I thank you, Markus, and you're gonna be around. I know we're gonna be working together, so that's not gonna come to an end. But we will have you again. But on my part, thank you guys. Final questions.
You know, I've got a great business idea that I think we all need to wrap our heads around. You know, we talked about the love of, you know, fresh cured salted meats and heat, and why has a sauna company not, or a sauna stove company or a grill company not merged and created you know, a brand for perfect sauna heat and perfect sausage heat? Okay, I mean, we're talking about $1 million idea here. We got to create a stove that can heat this, you know, maybe it's a through wall. You know, we build a sauna, it's a through wall stove. It's got rocks on one end. It's got, you know, a smoker on the you know, on the exterior wall. We can, you know, smoke meat. We can, you know, have a sauna all at the same time. You know, Markus, with your help, I think we need to get that off the ground. So I'm looking forward to helping whatever design, you know, I can come up with.
Oh, Sam, I love that. That's beautiful. Sauna smoked sausages. So
Yeah.
you get the essence of the wood-fired smoke, but you also
Yep.
get the sauna essence into the meat, you know, and what a brilliant idea.
And we
Love
build
it.
a giant sauna mobile like the Wiener Mobile. The old Oscar Mayer Wiener Mobile, you know, the
Yes.
giant hot
Oh,
dog
dude.
rolling down the highway, you know, bun and a hot dog. We could do, you know, just a giant sauna and then, yeah, sling meat too. I mean, that's great.
Listen, and guess what? Not that crazy of an idea, because that's all part of, I think, the part and parcel of the sauna package, which is, you know, listen, we know how eccentric Finns can be and how fun they have with their saunas as well as being serious. So why not? Let's do it. I'm in.
Love it. Well, we'll zigzag across the country. We'll get up to Toronto soon.
Yeah, man.
Thank you for coming on to the show. I really do appreciate it. It was a great conversation today.
Yeah, if I could, I just want to close by saying thank you very much for having me, and just my sort of parting message is to, you know, to live life to the fullest. You know, it really is. Every day is a gift, and this conversation is a gift, and sauna might be the greatest gift to us humans. Maybe the greatest non-celestial gift that we can ever think of, and it's really a sauna life. It can be so fulfilling, you know, and sauna really I can draw a path between sauna and happiness, and we can touch on the details in a future episode, but through the resilience that sauna builds, through the connection with oneself through solitude, through the exposure to nature and heat, through the community that it can build, these are all vital elements of human happiness, and sauna seems to be at the core of all of these things, or can be. And so it's an integral part, or it can be an integral part of not just a wellness from a physical standpoint, but human happiness. And you know, there's no coincidence that Finland just got ranked 7th year in a row happiest country in the world. I'm surprised that no one has yet drawn a closer link between their sauna world, and the happiness that they attribute to so many factors. But maybe one day someone will write a book about it.
Yeah, that's very philosophical, which is fitting because we'll, you know, tell our viewers we're going to link to your website and your dad's book, which again has that title, you know, Sauna Exists, Therefore I Am, which is a play on Descartes' statement about existence. And, you know, I can't recommend his book highly enough. It's very good. All of our Sauna Geek readers should go out there and check it out. And we appreciate everyone being here for this episode. And if you like the podcast and you want to support us, we have a Patreon page, and we appreciate all the engagement. You know, let us know in the comments about your sauna or banya experience, or how you host people.
Thank you, and I just want to conclude on my part that Finland is 7th year in a row is the happiest country on earth. It sort of is kind of misleading, and it takes away a little bit from the sauna corner, because it's not really happiness that it's measuring, but it's like that fulfilling life kind of an experience, which is very prevalent back home. And depending on how things are going to go, you know, there are pockets in North America that are doing great sauna-wise, sauna quality is a different. We're still at the corner of the dry part pretty much, which is not like healthy in the longer run, but I'm sure that we're gonna be getting there. Thank you so much, everyone. Till next time, take care. Bye bye.
Itos.
Hitos.